Hi, welcome to the 9th stop on the Freedom Trail. This is the Old State House. Now this is my favorite building in Boston. In fact, it's the oldest building in Boston and it's the oldest public building in the United States. So the building that you see behind me was built in 1713. But prior to that, there was the first townhouse of Boston, which was a two-story wooden structure that burnt in the fire of 1711. Now, the first townhouse of Boston was constructed in 1658, and the contractor to build it was a man named Thomas Joy. He just happens to be my 10 times great-grandfather. So I think that's pretty cool. A couple years ago, I went inside the State House and they showed me the actual contract that he had signed from 1658. So I thought that was pretty neat. Now, the townhouse would have been where the seat of government was. Now, this was a two-story townhouse, so the upper floor was for the government and the lower floor was a place for merchants to sell their goods. Now remember, we were a British colony at that time, so the royal governor held his offices in the second floor there, and he was a voice of the king. So whenever the king had news or information to give us, he would step out on that balcony and he would give us the good news, like, we're going to tax your paper, we're going to tax your sugar, we're going to tax your tea. But anyway, so on that, above that balcony, you'll see two statues, and there's the lion and the unicorn. Those were symbols of the king, so that's why those statues were there. Now, July 18th of 1776, that is where the Declaration of Independence was read from the very first time, right up there on that balcony. Now, remember, it was signed in Philadelphia, so copies had to get to all the different cities and towns, so that took a little while. So after they read the Declaration of Independence, then they took down those two statues, which were wooden, and they burned them in a bonfire. Meanwhile, up in New York, down in New York, they decided to tear down the statue of King George. So I'm gonna get rid of all the symbols of the British government. So after the Revolution, then the townhouse became the State House. So it became the Massachusetts State House. And it was a State House until 1798, when we built the new State House. And if you remember, that was the second stop on the Freedom Trail. Now, after they moved out, City Hall moved in. So City Hall occupied the building until the new City Hall was built. And remember stop 7, the old Boston Latin School? That's where the new City Hall was built in the Second Empire, French Empire, which was a beautiful, beautiful building. And it stayed there until the government building was built for it. And so Boston's doing a very good job of repurposing its buildings. So we're proud of you for that, Boston. But after the City Hall moved out in 1881, it finally became a museum. And they decided at that time that they were going to put up replicas of the lion and the unicorn. So the statues that you see up there today are actually replicas. And at the same time, they decided to put a statue of an eagle on the west side of the building. So the State House, also, one more thing, there's a subway underneath the State House. So I told you Boston had the oldest subway, but it goes right underneath the State House, and you come out and you come out of the basement of the State House, and there you are. But in 1776, Queen Elizabeth came to Boston, and she stood on that balcony, and this is our bicentennial, remember, 1776? And she said these words, which I'll have to read. She said, "Now, if Paul Revere, Sam Adams, and other patriots could have known that one day a British monarch would stand on the balcony of the old State House, from which the words of the Declaration of Independence was first read to the people of Boston, and be greeted by such kind words and generous people, well, I think they would have been extremely surprised, but perhaps they also would have been pleased to know that eventually we came together and as a free people and friends to defend together the very ideas for which the American Revolution was fought." Now that's the old State House. Our next stop will be the Boston Massacre, which happened right in front of the old State House. I'll see you there. Bye.